Welcome, everyone. I am Heidi, and next to me is Fadista, and this is Fierce Honest Hearts. And we are thrilled and happy to be back with you today. It's been a couple weeks, and yeah, it's raining here where I am, and I think it's raining where you are. And so we're glad to be here for those who can join us live. And for those who can't, we invite you to watch later and comment if you'd like and do all the things. So I'll start with a check-in. And what I'm noticing is that, and I know this, innately, I know this, when I have expectations and I'm disappointed, I'm like, that's on me. Like, that is on me. And so recently there've been a couple of disappointments and I'm just like, oh, I wish this was different, and it's not. And thank you for that. Oh, I don't know how to undo that. I'm in gallery. Anyway, I hear that I'm pinned and I don't know how to undo that. Sorry. Anyway, so the disappointment, and I realized that in order for me to feel differently, that I have to have my process through it, and that's what it is. And I realized that this is going to continue to show up, in just because it has throughout my life. And I do want it to be different, and I do want this to change. And I will say there's some situations where it's a lot easier to not have expectations. And I will say, and I think what I'm realizing is that, because there are times when I don't have expectations, and I think in those moments, I'm probably more vulnerable. And so I'm like, yeah, I'm noticing that about myself. I'm like, yeah, I think I'm less tied to the outcome and less, have less expectations. And I prefer to be in that space, because then I don't have the outcome that I don't like. And then the other thing that I wanted to share is that my nephew's basketball season started on Monday, and he's had 2 games already. And the sweet thing about that for me and my family and my loved ones is that whether or not he realizes it, he's bringing us together as a collective, as a community. And so typically during a game, there's some chatting going on, some texting going on, and a lot of fun emojis and whatnot. And yeah, and then this is his 3rd year, and there's been so much improvement in not only in the way that he plays the game, but in his confidence and the way that he approaches the game, the way that he approaches just like the culture of it all. It's really lovely to see. And I had a friend text me last night, and she's like, it's like he's a man. Right? And I'm like, yeah, he really is showing up like a man. I mean, he's 20 now, and legally he's been a man for 2 years, since he was 18. That's what they say makes you an adult. But yeah, his confidence and his maturity has really flourished. And it's been, for me, a really an important transformation to be a witness to, and and just loving on him more than I have. So yeah, so there, I'm going to leave it at that.
Wow, what a beautiful share. Thank you. I'm hearing you around expectations, and the higher the stakes, maybe the more the heart gets pulled into expectations. I can relate to that. I recently had a conversation with a family member and felt some disappointment. And sitting with my partner, I said, gosh, I only get disappointed when I have expectations, right? Just the clarity of that's on me. And I'm a messy human and I'm going to have them sometimes. So, kind of holding some compassion for, yes, the disappointment self created to some degree. And sometimes I want the people I love to do better, like just do better. Right. So, holding like, is it an expectation or is it a value? And then is it a standard that I want to uphold people to, or is it a standard of my own that I can't necessarily enlist people in? Right. It's a little murky there for me right now. Can I invite people into it at the very least? And if they decide to do their own funky thing, like, can I be okay with that? Right. So yeah, it's interesting because I'm feeling into that my expectations really touch upon my values. And so that's good information, right? Um, but yeah, how to not be disappointed by people. I don't know. I really don't know. Maybe it's just part of it, you know. And then I just love because you've shared this with me about your nephew, and I very vividly remember when the season ended last year, the sadness you felt because there had been so much family connection from a joyful place, from a place that was festive, right? And I love as the start of the season's actually happening, it's really sweet to see you already connect with that and then connect with, he might not even know how much he's bringing you all together and what a sweet gift. He's just doing what he loves, right? And he's bringing the family together. So it just feels like a win-win all around. And I got this picture of like, a man flowering, right? Like going from young child to an articulate, because I've seen the interviews, like articulate, thoughtful, very collaborative, team-oriented young man. It gives me hope for that generation, to be honest. Yeah. So thank you for sharing that.
You're welcome.
So precious, to have family come together. I think that's why sports, I kind of get it now. I didn't have a sporty family. So it took my partner's adoptive sort of family and their love of sports to be like, what is all the hype about? And it's a real joy and a connector. So yeah, seeing that and relating to it over here. I still feel like I'm landing from my trip in Peru. Both in like the day to day, like what's on my calendar, what's on my to do list, the very normal human place. And then also the very kind of spiritual cosmic place. I feel like my journey in the Amazon rewired my nervous system, maybe even like rewired my like spiritual wiring a little bit. So I am kind of learning this person that came back. And I kind of knew that was going to happen when I kind of said goodbye to the house, the day of our flight. Some part of me told me I wouldn't be walking in the same. Like, how could you, just traveling, that changes things. But knowing I was going into ceremony, I was excited / curious about, how am I going to walk back in here? Who am I going to be? And as I shared with you, some like repressed trauma came up in my journey. And I consider myself very trauma informed, and I've worked through all the trauma that I was aware of, right? Using all my tools and the tools I teach people. So it was very surprising / not surprising to have something come up that I didn't have memory of. It's bringing a lot of compassion to me for people who have repressed memories come up, because it's, I don't know how to explain it. It's jarring. It's new information. That's part of the epicenter of her, right? It's kind of like when people find out they're adopted or something, and I don't want to compare, but there's like, it's a new download to integrate. And I feel like I'm back to some natural factory settings that maybe were mine before trauma entered my world. Feels more expansive. I need a lot more stillness and quiet. Things that are fast are not for me right now. So like texts, commercials, quick talkers, like somehow I need to be going really slow, if not still, right? Almost so still that it's like, am I going backwards a little? And yeah, I guess that's where I'll stop for now. But there's just integration on all levels happening. And I don't quite know what all of it is. Yeah. Learning to yield in this time.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing all of that. And the integration piece, I've experienced it myself. And I remember in my own experience of it, I really didn't want contact with anyone because I had been not isolated, but in a different culture for 6 months. That's a long time to live in a very simplistic way with very little, just, I mean, really, just without, and it was good. And it didn't, and what I'm aware of is that it didn't take me long to integrate into that culture, but it took a lot more energy and a lot more time to integrate into the American culture. And I was like, oh, wow, this is, the simplicity felt more familiar to me and more to, I felt like it spoke to more of who I am than the other. And yeah, and I mean, I could share, stories, but yeah, I mean, I had a couple breakdowns, literal breakdowns, and I was like, I need to be paying attention here. And this was 10 years before I really started doing any really intentional work on myself. So it was a real struggle. It was an uphill, it was an uphill climb for me. And yeah, and I realized, I was like, I just have to take it one day at a time, because it's one of those processes that just does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I'm finding, you were having my back with scheduling and knowing, at least in the past, how much I could overschedule myself. And this week, I just couldn't do it. Like, there was a very protective, maybe, part of me, or wise part of me, that was like, we can't do back-to-back stuff. And I may never be able to do back-to-back stuff again. That's how it feels like. And I don't want to fully integrate into this culture. That's what I'm also aware of. Full integration into this culture would be abandoning myself a bit. So I'm happy to be here. I do love my home and my state and my country in many ways. And I'm pretty clear I don't want to fully integrate. I don't want to buy back into the programming. 2 weeks is not a very long time. When you say 6 months, I think, damn, that has to be hard. 2 weeks, though, was enough to see how other people live, and the kindness and the warmth and the care and the love of earth and nature. And to be like, whew, I don't want to forget any of that, and maybe be an ambassador of it here. But yeah, something about being in the jungle and being where you are so, where I was just so small in the best possible way,
Mhm.
right? Like the vegetation feels like there should be dinosaurs around. Like it's just huge and green and lush, and it has the greatest biodiversity on the planet. So birds and the butterflies and the frogs and the people, like it was just like I was so overwhelmed with the blessing of nature,
Mm.
and had no tech, had no light pollution, had no sound pollution. I mean, as a highly sensitive person, it was just like a place I could melt. Um, and I just thought this is so much closer to our DNA, right? As humans, what, 200,000 years as upright humans, and maybe 6 million as primates. Like we didn't have all this technology and light pollution, and we were connected to the earth. We knew that she fed us and held us. So yeah, maybe I won't fully integrate. That's what I'm getting.
Yeah, yeah.
Can I ask you, because when you say the 6 months, I just wonder if that culture felt in line with your rhythm and who you are, the simplicity of it. You said it was easy to integrate into that culture, but really hard to come back to this one. Would you mind sharing a little more?
Sure. Yeah. Um, so let me start by saying that when I left the States and I flew to Rome, I had no expectations. I knew nothing because I knew what I knew about their culture, but I didn't really know anything. And one of the things that became very noticeable to me is how they really are all about family. And so they spend a lot of time, and they're outside. They're at the market, they're at the coffee bar, they are in the square, like all the piazzas are full of people. And they don't necessarily have to be doing anything. And this, of course, was before cell phones mostly. I mean, it was in 96. So it was really before, I mean, people had phones, but not like they do today. And so I think that's part of it, and of course I came back and still really no cell phones. But anyway, um, so people were actually communing. And that was the first thing that I was like, my God, people like talk to each other. And I know that sounds whatever it sounds like, but no, really communing. Like there's a difference between saying, hey, it as you're passing by someone, but it's a whole different thing to be as you're coming towards someone, like connecting and having a conversation, whether it's 5 minutes, but it's more than just a passing by, right? Like there's a real connection that happens. And I wouldn't say that it happens all the time, but it happened more than I was used to, for sure. And there was no cat. And it's interesting because I think Italian men get this kind of negative whatever they get, about women. But the truth of the matter is it's very different. It's not catcalling. Like in this country, we know what catcalling is. We know what it is to be looked at differently and all that kind of stuff. And like, it's just gross. The Italian men, I want to say as a whole, and I realize I'm generalizing, I'm making this as a generalized statement, they actually love and appreciate women and their beauty. It's not, I wouldn't say it's sexual in nature. There might be some of that, but like and I was blonde at the time, so I stood out like a sore thumb. Like I was really noticeable as a white American with blonde hair and green eyes. And I'm like, okay, and of course I walk through the world, I don't really notice these things, but then when there are men that are paying attention, I'm like, it was a little weird at first, but and then I realized, I was like, no, they are appreciating me as a woman, as myself. And it didn't feel gross. Like I wasn't, resisting it, and it was a different thing for me to experience, right? And so that's another thing. And I don't know what this is, because someone else mentioned this to me, another American mentioned this to me. So they're with their families, communing with their families in a social, very public place. And it seemed to me, and again, I could be mad, but it seemed to me as if there was no need for them to discipline their children. Like, their children weren't whining, they weren't complaining, they were just they seemed to be content being where they were. And I don't know if that has to do with living in a very simple way without a lot of extra stuff and a lot of stimuli and all that kind of stuff. And I'm not even talking about a phone. I'm talking just about how we overload our lives with so much crap. And why do we have so many storage unit facilities in this country? It's because we have too much crap that we won't get rid of, right? So getting back to the simplistic lifestyle, and I was like, and the more that I was in it, I embraced it. And it was so easy to embrace, because when you don't have it and you don't see it around you, there's nothing else to know. So I'm really identifying with the getting back to Mother Earth and the jungle, and so noticing the grandiose of the leaves, just leaves, like, that's insane, right? And then the leaves are on a tree, and the tree is bigger than the leaves, and then the colors are so vibrant, and then there's no noise pollution, so you can literally hear, like, if someone went like this, you could probably hear it, right? Like 20 feet away, maybe. And so, yeah, I didn't have, Rome is not without noise pollution. I will say that, just because of the traffic, but it has a different, I'm not sure how to qualify the lack of noise pollution, like, but there is a lack of, I don't know. Anyway, so I don't know if that, did I answer your question? Okay. Yeah. And I want to encourage you to hang on to this for as long as you can, because it changes you in such a good way, in such a deep way. And it's so important to embrace it all. And yeah, because I would say for me, like, the memories that I have of that time are precious. And I don't know that there's another word for it, but they are really precious. So, yeah.
Thank you so much for just elaborating more on your experience there, because yeah, I think travel changes us, getting to see how other cultures live and not being so stuck in, like, this is the way, because this is one way out of 296 countries, right? And that's not even cultures amidst the countries. So it always broadens that viewpoint for me. And I'm just loving simplicity. Could be just where I'm headed with my own life and my age, but like quality and simplicity. And I don't need a lot. I don't want a lot. I want the things that bring me joy and comfort. And I think when you say, like, stay with it as long as you can, I feel so comforted knowing I don't have to rush the integration. And two things I really felt in Peru, like, family was strong, right? Clearly people were caring for and prioritizing family, and intergenerational. So you could see the different, grandma's hanging out with the granddaughter, and the mom's there, and the husband's there, and all of that. And their plant game was really strong. Everywhere we went, people were tending to plants, caring for plants, creatively decorating with plants, like, in ways I don't see here. where it's like almost bringing the outdoors indoors as much as possible, which is what I'm currently being creative with our bathroom, which has so much white space. To be like, how could it be like a little jungle in here? Because it felt really comforting, like both the in the jungle forest bathing, but even in a restaurant, kind of like plant bathing. It felt like they didn't create any separation between the plant kingdom and themselves. And I do think that's a big issue here, and why we're not resolving certain bigger issues around Earth, because we're not in like daily yummy connection with our plant kingdom. Not most of us. I think some people really do that well. I wonder for you, right? Like even when you name like men appreciating feminine beauty versus appreciating it to possess it, which I think catcalling here has that unspoken energy to me. Like, oh, I appreciate it, but it's only really about for my own means, not for showering you with adoration, right? It's a different energy. What was it like for you? I guess, did you ever fully integrate back into the US, or are you different in how you see life now? Oh, I can't hear you.
And you're talking about all of the things that I shared, not just yeah, okay.
Yeah, really any of it, but like, did you really fully integrate back, or did you just
No,
shift?
I don't feel like I did. That's the short answer. Um, and it's because my memories are so vivid, and I have this ability to recall certain experiences that I had, and places that I visited, and coffee bars that I sat outside with friends, and my my walking path. I mean, I walked everywhere. Rome is a very walkable, easy city. It's also it's got a lot of, I mean, the bus system, but I mean, European transport is like no other, right? And so, I mean, I literally walked everywhere, which was lovely. And I unknowingly, I was prepared for that. I had the right clothes and I had the right shoes, and I was very sensible in the choices that I made to pack and whatnot. So I will say that is helpful. You do not want to go and pack a pair of stilettos. Just don't do it, because it will make no sense. So yeah, and so as far as, so I want to really focus on the simplicity and I don't want to, not, the word is not lack, but just this word simplicity and having less. So that, because what happens for me is, and I'm aware of, like, this is certainly connected to my experience there, but living with less means I can notice more, and I can integrate that into my spirit and that into my mentality and emotional well-being, because that's really what I want. And I would literally walk outside, and I was inspired by architecture and all kinds of things every moment of the day, and the cobblestone streets, they're kind of a pain in the neck to walk on. They're not easy to walk on, but if you have the right shoes, not stilettos, if you have the right shoes, you're going to be okay. But even that, I was like, oh my God, I love all of this. And then every single church, and there is a church, it's a very Catholic city. It's just happens to be the way that it is, but every single church it's just full of art. And so the artists from those days, they had the opportunity to paint frescoes on the wall, like talk about white space in your bathroom, right? And so they took the white space, the white stucco, and they painted frescoes on the wall. And that was literally everywhere. And then the amount of marble, like just steps going into the Pantheon, or again, a church, or this, whatever. I mean, and then they're worn. There's some beauty about the wear and tear of that. Yeah, so I'm really grateful to have a vivid memory of just my life. Like that's just been one of my, one of my superpowers. And so that has been helpful. That's certainly been helpful for me to be able to not only integrate, but keep the integration alive of what I experienced there. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much, because I feel really hopeful, given that I have a vivid and very visceral experience of everything, that it won't just like fade away. So
Yeah. Good.
hmm.
Yeah. So is there anything else you want to share with us about your trip, or
Yeah, there's a part of me that's like, which trip, right?
your most recent,
Which trip?
or which trip, right?
Well, I think I'm continuing to integrate what came through in ceremony, and the work I do is certainly not as intense as that, but I've been looking at the common threads. It's hard for me not to. And one of the things I really got was like the poison is also the medicine, right? So often we want to kind of recoil from the hard stuff in our life, the hard memories or the hard conversations, or all of it, and kind of in the realm of, in my experience, like, oh, that's too scary, or that's too hard, or that's too dark, whatever that means for people. And I really came out of it going, you got to go in. You got to go into those places. Now, people can choose their whole lifetime not to. That's okay. I don't operate that way. So just that the poison is the medicine. And maybe in connection to your simplicity share, like in this moment, nothing is lacking. That's something I have continued to feel. Prior to this healing journey, I think I had more FOMO. And maybe one of the reasons my schedule got overbooked was because I didn't want to say no, or I didn't want to miss out, or I wanted to come through for somebody last minute. And I had at least one opportunity this week where I could have said yes to something, to kind of come through for someone. And I was like, no, I don't want to be triaging. Like that energy doesn't feel good to me. And it can wait, right? Also that place of like, it's so funny because I came home and I was like, I really want to like jungle up the bathroom, but we need to go get plants. And like, what kind of plants, and blah, 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 right? And then it got cold enough that we had to bring all the balcony plants in from outside. And I was like, oh my God, they're already here. They might be placeholders because they're kind of like big, big plants. But just the creative expression of that. It wasn't a mundane to do chore. I didn't have that energy. It had the like, ooh, I'm inspired. Let me see what I can do with the bathroom. Much more playful. And I think that's a souvenir I want to keep, which is when I'm inspired to do something, I take action pretty quickly. And I, use, even if there's constraints, I get creative with what I have. That feels like sweet and simple. Because we could have gone, to the nursery and bought $300 worth of plants and did this whole thing. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it was like, oh, wait, like I have all this stuff right on the ground in the living room right now because it's too cold for them outside. So working with what you have feels important, that nothing is lacking. And while I, won't share the whole journey that I went through, because I've shared that with you already, the thing that stuck with me is, yes, there is this human animal that absolutely needs to be taken care of, has needs, right? Has human needs, has like just day-to-day needs. And like, I believe we're way more vast than just this. So there's kind of that double view for me of like, we're kind of cosmic and vast, and people can say this, but I feel like I saw it. I got to experience it. So there's almost like, oh, there's a really big self, a grand self. And there's the little self that's still got to be on earth and get shit done, right? And like, how can this just be more playful, more fun? Yeah, that's my takeaway right now. It doesn't have to all be so serious.
Right. Right. It doesn't. We
Right?
can
So
have,
serious and anxiety producing. Like, why?
right. We can actually have fun with it. Right. And so, and what I'm really loving, like, as I'm listening to you, and you said, we already have the resources to do the bathroom because they're already here. But how many times do we ignore that? We think, no, we need more. And I think in our culture, that is happening over and over and over again. And I can't tell you, and I will speak for myself, where I've overwhelmed myself with crap. And then I'm like, and then I find myself giving it away, which feels really good. But in the first place, I'm like, I didn't need it in the first place.
Yeah.
That's why it feels so good when I get rid of it, when I purge it, Yeah. So for me to be more mindful about what I'm bringing in, like, is it cluttering me? Is it cluttering my life? Is it, how am I feeling by having whatever it is that I'm bringing into my life? Like that, I think it's important to look at and
Mhm.
really important to consider. And, when I think of kids, like young children and birthdays and stuff, and they invite friends and whatnot, and they just have this overwhelming amount of, so they're learning from a very young age, overwhelmed by all this stuff, and I'm like, okay, so let's slow it down. Like we could probably pack away, whoever those parents are can probably pack away at least 2/3, if not 3/4 of the toys or whatever they get, and then kind of divvying them out, and then spread the love, like share the stuff. Because kids, I mean, I think I've heard that we only wear like 1/10 of what's in our wardrobe. That is daunting, but I'm like, yeah, I relate, because I have stuff that I haven't worn for a long time. I mean, we typically wear the same things over and over. And yeah, anyway, I digress. But yeah, I'm really appreciating that you were like, no, these plants have to come in. And now they're going into the bathroom to create and how easy was that? You don't have
Well,
to
and
think.
we'll see what Richard thinks, because he might have his say around how much light and stuff they need. So like, I didn't take that into account, but I was like, this is fun right now. Like
Yes.
I'm making a jungle out of our bathroom. This feels really good. And similar to you, like I remember being a kid and at Christmas getting like one doll that I really, really wanted, or one Mary Poppins VHS that I really, really, really wanted. And it, like, I'd wear those things out because I didn't have 18 things I got.
Mhm.
Where it's like, well, now we're creating ADD in a kid's attention, orientation. What do I play with first? What do I discard? And it's like, well, I'm actually making a bag of clothes to give away because there's a similar call within that's like, You don't need all of this. And I'm a minimalist by nature, but still there's a moment to purge here.
Yeah.
And it feels really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yes. So we were going to talk about, which I'm like, oh, this kind of leads into that, which is interesting, but I also want to pay attention to the time. So without all of this stuff, like without the extra, we actually have more energy to focus on ourselves, because oftentimes what's here is really hard to look at, right? And so, and if we have distractions, of course, that's it's easy to be out here. And I shared with you, when did we talk? Wednesday? It seems like a week ago, but anyway, Wednesday we talked, and I was sharing with you that one of the things that I've been doing, which is really hard, but I'm doing it anyway, is taking time to actually look in the mirror and not do anything, just look at myself. And that doesn't mean, plucking a hair off my chin or brushing my hair, or just looking at myself. And the reason that I'm doing this is because in our culture, and it's just, I feel like it's getting worse and worse and worse, is this idea, this concept of, first of all, anti-aging. There's no such thing. We're all going to age, right? But also changing the way that we look, like, as opposed to simply accepting who we are and loving ourselves and loving on ourselves as we are, as we grow and change and become different, ourselves, but different people within ourselves. And so, yeah, certainly there are things about, I look in the mirror and I'm like, God, that's not changing, because it's not going to change unless I get Botox or cosmetic surgery or whatever. I'm like, yeah, don't have time, or I'm like, I really don't have time for that. But so I'm curious if this is something that you have ever struggled with or thought about, or in your own personal work, like, has this come to you in a way where you're like, oh yeah, I do that too, or I'm relating to this. I'm curious to hear your thoughts about it.
yeah, absolutely. I think since my journey coming back, I've been choosing to meet myself in the mirror in a very different way,
Okay.
to really like look into my eyes, to meet myself, right? Not to be there to fix myself in some way, just like you. And I think I had the realization, gosh, it could have been a year ago, that the only time I stepped up to the mirror was to fix something about myself. Right. And even if I wasn't going to the mirror to fix myself, when I'd see myself in the mirror, the first thing I would do would critique something that needed to be fixed.
Mm,
Right. It's almost like I was only scanning for imperfections
uh-huh.
and then taking action to, like you said, like tweeze an eyebrow or um, cover up a freckle or whatever, add a little more lightener shadow into my brow bone. And I kind of was like, damn, that's sad that when I catch my reflection in the mirror, I am looking for problems. And I'm kind of missing the whole boat here. That I'm like in this earth suit in space as a human, as a soul, getting to, for whatever coincidences, be this person, right? With these features. And like I'm not taking in just sort of the the marvel of that. I'm looking at what's wrong here today. And I got kind of sad about I got pretty sad about it because it kind of hit me in the face, that that's what I was doing. And I had to look at some of my programming. Obviously, men and women get this programming looking at all these models and magazines and the things we've talked about. And it also reminded me of when I first went to Hollywood to be an actress. This is 25 years ago, as a foreign kid, which they didn't know what to do with me because I wasn't like foreign enough looking and I wasn't white enough looking. So they just like, there was no place for me at that time. This has obviously changed tremendously in the last few decades. But I remember a casting director saying, like, you're not going to get hired unless you make your nose smaller. And I have a very Persian nose. I have my father's nose. And I just thought, thank goodness, my thought was, that's my father's nose. Like, I'm not cutting that up. Like, are you kidding? Right? Like, if that's the cost. And I think I had another casting director tell me to straighten my teeth. Right. And yeah,
Hmm.
I had some cinnamon in there. And I had an incredible dentist or orthodontist who had daughters my age at that time. And he was like, you have such strong roots. Your teeth are so strong. They're so healthy that if we start moving all of these around, you're going to have loosey goosey. Yes, they'll be straight, but they're not going to be healthy. And
Mm.
he's like, if you were my daughter, I would tell you no. And he could have made his 5 to 10 grand off of that, right?
Sure.
And he said something that stuck with me. He's like, do you want people to remember you for your straight teeth or for like your swagger and your attitude and your energy?
That
You
is
know?
brilliant.
And I was 19. I was so impressionable, right? Yeah. And I was like, oh, yeah, I do want people to remember me for my energy. Like, fuck having one crooked teeth. I'm not going to mess this whole batch for what, you
Right.
know? And I actually find it really endearing when people have imperfections. I love it about people. That little bit of like a bald spot in the beard or like a cute little crooked tooth or one eyebrow that has like a little clipping on it. I adore it. So to make us all like fit off a factory line, so to speak, is pathetic to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But I share all that because there was still a little bit of programming in me
Mhm.
that would brush my teeth in front of the mirror, but also be just like surveying what needed fixing.
Mhm.
And I just realized that was hurting a part of me.
Mhm.
I didn't want to do that anymore.
Mhm.
So it's taken a lot, like most of my life, honestly, to
Yeah.
get to a place where I'm just like, wow, when I look into my eyes, I'm just meeting the soul
Mhm.
that's there and
Right.
really thrilled to like have this adventure with that soul.
Mhm.
And I think I'll fall into that pit sometimes, on lower days.
Mhm.
Or I might be like, geez, maybe we do X or Z.
Mhm.
But I want it to be coming from a loving place of like, oh, I want to do a mud mask because it feels good, not
Mhm.
because I'm fixing myself.
Right.
Fixing ourselves feels like a never-ending maze created by society.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
When you were
that's how I feel.
sharing, the word cookie cutter came up for me, right? So if society or Hollywood or whatever is showing us the not real, the filtered, the fixed people who are, fixed in how whatever way they are, what is that doing to our mindsets, right? And even though everyone does not look the same, it feels to me like that is what they're wanting to do or trying to do, or at least mentally wanting us to shift the way that we think about things. And I'm like, no, we are every single person. And I think that's one of the reasons that I really appreciate humanity. I can't say that I like every human, but I appreciate every human because we all have our differences, not only physically, but mentally and emotionally and spiritually. And this is how we learn from one another. Like, have conversations, because whether or not the beauty is obvious, whether or not it's, when you look at someone, you're like, oh my God, or if it's more internal and you really learn to take time to understand, if I can have compassion and listen and witness another person, we'll never get there unless we do that. And that to me is way more important, way more important than the other, because this goes away. All the filters, all the Botox, all the cosmetic surgery, at some point, I mean, if you don't keep it up, it's going to go away. And if you've not worked on yourself, or have an opportunity for some self-awareness, that concerns me more than anything else, because this is our essence. What's inside of us is our essence. And I think that as human beings is the most important thing that we can bring to ourselves, bring to our relationships, and bring to the world. And I feel like I'm at in a pulpit, or like, but it's really true. Like, it really feels true to me. And I feel really passionate about that, because we have to do better.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And just remembering that this culture really preys on us not feeling good enough.
Yeah.
Because that's how you're going to buy the things, the teeth whiteners and the waist slimmers and the hair color and maybe the $400 ugly purse, all the things that people do. Don't buy into it. Best you can. Don't buy into it, because you're already like a marvel. I
Right.
mean, I just keep looking at, like, we are hurling around in space on this spaceship that feeds us at like 1,000 miles per hour with some kind of gravity and a sun. And then here we are trying to design and create our lives. Like, that's enough.
Yeah. And for some
That's
of
enough.
us, yes, it is enough. And for some of us, whether or not we recognize it, it's too much.
Mhm.
And so it
Mhm.
might be a good idea for those of us who may not be aware that it's too much. Think about the things that Fidesta just shared, right? Think about those things and ask yourself, am I even noticing? Am I noticing that this is what's happening, not only to me, but everyone else on this planet? Like, we're all
Yeah.
moving together. We're all doing this at a certain pace. And am I aware of that? Am I personally aware of what's happening around me? And if I'm not, what do I need to do to change that? Because if I'm missing that, I am certainly
Mhm.
absolutely missing something else.
Mhm. Yeah. And I can only speak for me, but like, I'm checking where I strive. Like, am I striving because it brings me joy, or am I striving because of some uh, lack,
Yeah.
or at least perceived lack? Because I don't think there's really lack.
Right. I don't think so either. It's how you consider it. It's how you think about it. Yeah. Yeah.
And can I value myself enough to say no to things when I really need to rest?
Right.
And I value myself enough to take time for a healing journey when maybe in the real world it would make sense to keep chugging along and working.
Yeah.
Right? Like, these places we get called to, I think they're important. And yeah, just noticing the differences. This sounds like a silly thing, and I know we're at time, but like, in LA, my teeth couldn't be white enough. It was like, we got to whiten them. We got to whiten them. It's just this weird uh, conditioning of Hollywood, right? And the dermatologist being like, you've got to wear sunblock every day and close your curtains and wear sunblock in the house. And I was like, this is no way to live, homegirl. I'm not doing this. I'm a sun worshiper, and I'll work with what I have to work with in the future. And then I come to the East Coast and my dentist is like, what, damn, your teeth are white. You know, they're like one level beyond like true white.
Yeah.
Or yeah, your skin's fine. Just be mindful of how much you get that midday sun.
Yeah.
And so just same country, different coasts.
Right.
It can be very clear there's conditioning.
Yeah, for sure.
Just checking what's not yours.
Right. Right.
You know, and people's fears and their projections, I can't take them on anymore.
Yeah. And they're not for us to take on
No.
because they're theirs. Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And they're probably someone else's, even though it's theirs, right? So it's like continuing to give back to people anything that's not yours.
Yeah.
I like that purge.
I do too. I do too. Because that works for me. Right? I feel it in my bones and I'm like, yeah, because I have enough on my plate. Yeah.
As do most of us, right?
I would say probably all of us, most of us, and probably all of us have enough on our plates. So why would we want to add another spoonful of whatever that does not serve?
Thank you, friend.
Oh, thank you, friend. Shall we pivot?
Yes.
Okay.
You got a question for us?
I
Chat pack?
do have a chat pack. Okay. Oh, as a child, what did you want to be when you grew up?
Billy Idol.
Wow. I so did not expect to hear that. Really?
I mean,
my
I
God.
think when my mom asked me, I said I wanted to lead by example. And she was like, she didn't know what to do with that because I was like
Okay.
8.
Okay.
But I definitely remember my first like inner, like something's going on inside of me that's exciting. Was watching Billy Idol sing and being like, I don't know what that is, but it's like strut, it's swagger, it's primal, it's unapologetic, right? Like there was a part of me that was like, something about that makes me feel really happy and alive. Yeah.
Wow. Wow. So what did I, yeah. What did
As
I
a
want to
child?
be? Well, so my memory is that I wanted to be a nurse. And I think it's because my mom was an RN. And not that she came home with any stories or anything, because she did work in the ER, but when she was much younger, but I thought I wanted to be a nurse, and I don't remember when that transitioned or changed into, I mean, I went to school for fashion design. I went to college for fashion design. I have a BS. And that was much more exciting to me because I could see the way that I have this, like when I look at a painting or I look at a garment, I don't just look at the garment. If I can get close enough to it, I want to see the stitching. I mean, I so appreciate handwork. Same way with the painting, same way with any piece of art. I can see the handwork in it. I'm like, and it just moves me to really deep places. And so, so yeah, that's for sure the artist in me. And I would never, I mean, I think we're all an artist, and I know that I'm an artist. I don't know that I can identify what kind of artist I am, but I have such a passion for it. Yeah.
I see that.
Yeah.
I see that. Thank you, friend. I
Thank
love
you,
knowing that
friend.
about you.
Oh, yeah. The Billy Idol, the images in my head are just phenomenal.
You know what it is though? It's like full self-expression.
Yes. I get that. Yes.
It's just like, hey, I'm here and I'm taking up space.
Yeah. Which is really important.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And I think very healing coming from a culture like one in Afghanistan for women.
Right.
As a kid being like, oh yeah, to take up that like to take up my space.
Mhm.
That's mine.
Right.
Yeah. So just like you have this calling to beauty, I think self-expression feels like art to me.
Yeah. I think it is. Yeah, for sure. Mm,
Mhm.
Thank you so much. Much love.
So
And
much love.
we will see you next time. Thank you all for joining us. If you haven't hit subscribe, please hit subscribe and like us, do all the things that you need. Share us with people that you think would, want to hear what we have to say.
Yep.
And
And we're adding, for those of you who are on Instagram, we'll be just beginning to show up there under conscious.friendships.
yes. Thanks,
So
everyone.
much.
Until next time. Oh, I
Bye.
can't leave the meeting yet. I have to, sorry.